Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're very honored to have with us today the Harris Poll CEO, John Gerzema, who will be presenting the most recent research that they have done on the ways that COVID-19 has impacted not only consumer behavior, but also shopping and travel plans for the fourth quarter of 2020. Their research highlights many opportunities that the pandemic has created for out-of-home, such as increased awareness of out-of-home advertising. I know you're eager to learn about these insights, so with that, I will welcome John and turn it over to him. Thank you.
Hey, Steve. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be back sharing our latest findings with OAAA, and I'm going to jump right in and share with you guys a little bit about our methodology and what we're going to cover. So we're going to kind of talk at a high level about the findings and recommendations, just to kind of give you a sense of the overall piece of research. And then what we're going to do is sort of take you through some chapters of our learning briefly in sort of the next 25 minutes or so. We're going to look at insights, not only insights and recommendations, but the sort of the macro context around COVID and how it's changing consumer lifestyles. This has been drawn upon now. We are in wave 33, 34, I think, since we started doing weekly surveys on all things COVID through our data in weekly polling. I think I had hair when I started this project. And you're going to see sort of how things have changed and how things have not changed. So we'll look at that in the context then in part one on fourth quarter mobility, what we're seeing in this specific OAAA Harris Poll survey that we just completed. Then we'll look at what we're calling the golden age of out-of-home advertising, or really what I see as a tremendous opportunity to sort of focus and help people reappraise brands. And we'll get into that. And lastly, we'll close on changing consumer habits. So, first couple of broad trends that you're going to see as you get into this, and I think the first one is that out is in, right? The outdoors is beating the indoors right now, and we see that in our data. 69% of people actually have greater appreciation and awareness for being outside, and they're more aware of their surroundings, and they are spending more time also trying to find safe outdoor activities to ground their time, with 3/5, 60% saying that they wish there were more even outdoor dining offerings. Now, I know as it's starting to get cold and people are going to naturally move more indoors, I think this is a really important point because you're going to see how that manifests itself in a few other things. The next one is related to what we call going micro mobile. That means that people are out, but they're out in some interesting ways. They're not just driving, they're also walking at 40%, they're biking and scootering at 27%. And even though a lot of them are sticking closer to home, the majority of Americans, 55%, say their travel patterns will be the same or greater in terms of frequency of trips, the number of trips and distance in comparison to pre-COVID. So why I think that's really important is that with these new modes of transportation, I think people are seeing things differently. I want you to look at that when we go into the data. If you're out on a bike, or if you're out on a scooter, if you're out taking walks, you're looking at the world a little bit differently. And even though you're more closer to home, you may be more in your region or in your community, you're more sensitized and more aware of your surroundings. And that, I think, creates an opportunity for outdoor. The next thing I think is interesting too to focus on from a marketing perspective is the fact that Americans are telling us that they're purpose tripping. 43%, almost half of Americans say, I'm actually trying to make fewer trips to the store and stock up on items as much as I can to minimize the number of times I go shopping. This makes a lot of sense. We're seeing that in a lot of our other COVID data. People want to be surgical with their shopping and their trips. They want to get in and get out and do things the right way. And so people are telling us, I've stopped casually shopping, and I'm focused on predetermined items. I'm making my lists and I'm going, kind of with a mission. And obviously safety matters. They're saying I prefer to shop at retailers that have thoughtfully planned through the store traffic. So on one hand, you can look at that and say, well, geez, maybe people aren't out as much. But I'd say the previous stat about going micro mobile says that people are getting out a lot more. But when they're going shopping, they're very, very purposeful. And I think that's also interesting too, because I think this suggests the idea that people have sort of their senses locked in, they're attuned to their environments, they're thinking about what they're going to do, they're kind of on a mission. And so I'm really interested in this idea of these heightened senses as people are out, not only taking stock of the outdoors, but really thinking about what they're doing. We have 3 more findings at a high level. This is going to be the holiday for bubbles. You probably saw this morning on CNN or Fox that Dr. Fauci said we really got to think carefully about whether or not we should be focusing on getting together in person for those family gatherings. And we see that in the data when we ask people about what their plans are for the holiday season. 45% say they are staying home and celebrating the holidays only with their immediate family, with a third, 27%, saying that they're limiting the number of people at their gatherings. Now, even though this bubble holiday is sort of happening, there's probably this trend around turkey pods. You're going to see truly, though, that people are actually not flying, right? And so that, again, creates a greater opportunity for driving. Smaller gatherings, potentially gatherings that aren't at the table. We might do this the old-fashioned pilgrim way, where we're going to be outside doing more gatherings and trying to get together with people in safe environments. So again, out is beating in. And lastly, I want to hit on in the argument in these data slides is brand reappraisal. I think out-of-home offers a huge environment for all these previous reasons I've just sort of laid out, to suggest that people are in the mode to seeking out new brands as they change their habits and behaviors. We see that 43% are using a mix of new and familiar brands, 12% are using new brands, and they will continue to replace old brands. And that creates a big opportunity. So let's get into the data a little bit deeper and talk first about COVID and what we're seeing. This is a chart that we've been building since mid-March. And basically it tells you that there is a lot of fear and anxiety in America. When we launched our COVID tracker in March 15th, 54% of the US population thought that the national fear was irrational. Well, that's no longer today. 70% believe that national fear is actually sensible. And as you can see, what's happened with the fear, number one insight is it hasn't really changed very much, right? There's been some ups and downs, there's been ebbs and flows on what we were fearful about. We were fearful early about ventilator shortages back in March on the blue line, and that started to wave a little bit, but it hasn't gone down much. 74% in March, 72% today, as we're hearing news of upticks in Europe and obviously rising cases again here in the States. But I think one of the really interesting, 2 interesting things left on this slide, not only is there a fear of a new wave that exists at 77%, but look at the bottom where you see the fear of losing one's job in orange and the fear of dying in green. And I think that's really the existential chart of our lives over the past 6, almost 7 months now, which is this constant tug and pull between my livelihood and my health and that of my family. And so I think that's something you have to be attuned to as you see all this data. Well, clearly, even though things have been incredibly difficult across the nation, and there's a lot of frustration and anxiety, we see that in the data. People, at the end of the day, we're human social creatures. We thrive for interaction. We thrive to get together. And as we get closer to the holidays, these feelings are growing. We asked in our OAAA Harris Poll survey, how much would you miss each of the following during these times of virus-related shutdowns? And you can see, gathering with friends and family, 3/4 of Americans really miss that. Dining out in restaurants and bars, 68%. Getting out and about, whether it's for birthdays, graduations, shopping, going to a social gathering, attending events. You can see all these numbers are 2/3 of Americans or higher. And then even as we work our way down that list, you're still talking about the majority of Americans missing sporting events and going to church, going to their coffee shop. A few are even missing traveling on an airplane. Not so many of us are missing working in the office. And the school or university statistic is a little low because this is a broad sample as we ask this question. But basically, people are missing getting out there. I think this is really important too, which is, moving forward today, Americans do see their lives changing. And just look at a few of these places where that's really the case. let's kind of actually focus a little bit lower down that list where the numbers really pop. If you look at travel and vacation, you have 68% of Americans saying that travel is going to be different. Social activity, 67% of Americans say how we socialize is going to be different moving forward during and out of this pandemic. And even our work life, 55% of Americans saying that how we work and how we commute to work and those things are going to change. And 64% say that shopping is going to change. So with all this dislocation, certainly there's going to be some snapback behaviors, right? Polling is a snapshot in time, but there also are going to be some probably long-term behaviors that we're going to try to get deeper in and unpack as we go forward. This is a trended chart also that looks at the various things that we want to do and when we'll do them. So the green line at the top, right at the beginning of the crisis, people believed, almost 45% of Americans, oh heck, we're going to be able to go back out to dinner soon. Well, that's obviously ticked up with outdoor dining as we got into the fourth quarter in September, but you can see that's even ticking back down again with the crisis. So all the things on this list, going to a gym class, 37% in March, 28% today, staying in a hotel, 20, I think that was at 28%, that's now 26%. Going to the movies, going to sporting events, visiting the casinos, all those things, really, literally nothing is ticked up dramatically, and most of these have actually declined. Now, it's important to also understand there's really been two economies through COVID. Basically, we see a bifurcation of economic malaise. Some people are better off, a lot of people aren't. And so when we ask this question, do you think your income will be higher or lower? Green line says higher, 25%. That's ticked up a little bit, a reflection of consumer confidence. But look at the folks that are saying it's lower. That is at 29%, and people saying it's about the same is about 46%. The number of people saying that they're lower is going down, so there seems to be an uptick a little bit. But what's really important underneath these numbers is the types of economic impact. So we've asked this question, what's a bigger challenge for you and your family long term? COVID, the threat of the health, your public health, your health, or the threat to your income and livelihood. And by a 60 to 40 margin, people are more worried about the economic impacts. But look at these statistics. I mean, this is really at the heart, of the stimulus bill and the fight that's going on right now in Congress and why so many people in small business need this. 85% of people in our Harris Poll study say they've been impacted financially. 31% say they've sought out new and additional sources of income. 30% have had to cut back on savings. 28% are providing financial support for a family member. So this is a classic economic crisis that's cutting across the fabric of so many different American lives. And what we see is that it's disproportionately affecting both younger people and people of color. Taking, for example, just looking at younger people, you can see that Gen Z and millennials really have higher levels of strife across those basic financial questions that I just shared in the previous slide. So with that, again, you're going to see some data a little bit about the opportunity as Gen Z and millennials are noticing more outdoor. How do we make outdoor work for them from an economic standpoint as well? The real interesting thing, now I'm sitting in my office here at One World Trade Center. I am one of two people on the entire floor. I thought I'd come in for some peace and quiet. And the point here is that people aren't really ready to go back to the office. We see high levels of support, almost 90% believing that they don't need to go back. Employees shouldn't force them back until there is no longer a threat of COVID. And the number of people in March at 63% saying they were going to go back is now dropped to 45%. So people aren't anxious to get back anytime soon. Doesn't mean they're not sick of being in the house and sick of Zoom calls. We'll talk about that shortly, but they don't necessarily want to get back to the office until it's safe. But people are being agile and flexible. One of the things that we did recently is we asked people, would you consider taking a workcation? And a workation is sort of a rise that is fueling Airbnb's recovery. One of the largest parts of Airbnb's bookings right now are families that have kids out of school doing online learning and or couples that are still at home deciding that they got to get out of the house. They need to change of pace. So they are taking month or longer workations to go and to visit a new sort of region or community around them or someplace else in the country. The key thing here is that they're driving to do this. So again, that's that narrative I was relating to earlier about people thinking differently. They're into new modes, they're driving a lot more, and they're open to new experiences. But when we look at sort of the outcomes of where we're at and where we're going, Americans are quite pragmatic right now. We see high levels of mask wearing in our data, and we also see a high level of support. Almost 3/4 of people back in June when things were so rough saying that they would support another lockdown. Today, those numbers are not that different. And in fact, while there's definitely political splits on these numbers with Democrats supporting them more than Republicans, overall, you still see a large degree of consensus over the desire to want to make sure that we are keeping people safe. So let's get deeper into the fourth quarter mobility picture. The first thing you got to really understand, again, which is sort of good, I think, for the industry, is that people want to be solo when they're moving. They are not taking airplanes, as you see at the bottom. 42% saying less, only 6% saying they're taking more. That goes the same for subways or light rail trains. Even though the narrative has been put out by many public officials that a lot of this public transportation is actually safe, at least here in New York City, they're saying that about the New York transit system, doesn't mean people are taking it. People are still very much on edge. And so walking, they're doing more of. Their personal vehicles, they're doing more of. And if you cum those numbers together, you've got 83% doing the same or more of walking. You have 42 and 29%. They get you to 77% saying that they are doing basically, 67% saying that they are doing basically more driving. We see in our Harris Poll data too, one of the key peak demand items were both bicycles as well as new cars, that people are in the market for new cars, I think at around 20-25% all summer. And talk about transportation, people would rather take a bike or a scooter than they would a taxi or a train or a trolley. So solo transportation is sort of the mode. And at the same time, people are claustrophobic. We have in our data, 52% of people are really cooped up and tired of being in the house. And when you think about that, and particularly in urban areas, you're going to see some of that data where people are in really small apartments. People are really out there and interested in getting back out. 2/3 of Americans are interested in taking a road trip during the pandemic. So mobility as therapy is another trend we got to really consider. And literally, when we get to cars, the overwhelming 9 out of 10 Americans say, how would you travel right now? They want to do it by their own personal cars. The next thing they do would be to get on a city bike, for example, before they do an Uber or a train. So that's also an interesting insight. And I think this is kind of interesting too, that, we have this shift toward kind of what we call hyperlocal travel. I talked about it a little bit earlier about sort of going micro, doing more trips, but doing them a little bit closer to home. And what's interesting is when you cum up this data, you have 55% of people saying that their travel patterns will be similar or increasing prior to sort of COVID. So we're out and about. It's more, sort of shorter passes versus long bombs, as you might say in football. But this is really a focus on, more surgical trips, doing things that are a bit more thoughtful. But definitely people are getting out because they have to get out of the house. So let's turn and look a little bit about holidays. When I first sort of looked at this data, I thought, well, the headline's a little contradictory to the data, but it actually isn't. If you look at it more closely, there's roughly in the Harris Poll data about 35% of Americans saying that they're going to travel, more or less. And so this year it's down from sort of 35% to 29%. So it's gone down considerably, but again, the place that's really getting hit hard is not only Thanksgiving, perhaps because it's closer, but also the fact that this is about airline travel versus sort of, regional community travel. Again, everything being done in smaller sort of increments of travel. And again, not surprisingly, those who travel for the holidays say that they're going to be primarily driving. Again, 67% say, in total, 56% say personal vehicles, versus 16% of airplanes. Those are very different numbers from sort of obviously the traditional holiday season. And again, with 33% of people saying I don't plan to travel at all for the upcoming holidays, even if it's a close trip. Clearly also, with the rising cases, with the uncertainty on the vaccine, with the uncertainty on literally everything, dislocation has been sort of the word of the year, pivoting and being dislocated. And so as a result, it's very difficult to make long-term plans. So people are living in the moment. And as of right now, again, when we ask, toward the holidays, you have 45% of people saying that they're going to stay home, they're going to celebrate the holidays only with their immediate family. Doesn't mean they're not going to get out and about. And that's, again, an important sort of statistic to understand that people are changing their habits. In total, 80% are saying that they have changed their habits because of the plans due to COVID, and taking sort of a wait and see as we go kind of into the first quarter. Again, why I think this is so important is that there's a lot of frustration behind this. We see two different types of emotions. People are thankful and they have a lot of gratitude. They're reappraising relationships. They're getting closer together. We're seeing that in a lot of our data. And then people are also obviously frustrated and claustrophobic and angry, and so they want to get out. I think those are sort of competing emotions that we can use to our understanding better of how to market to people right now. 1/4 of people we see in our data will travel locally this holiday season. Non-rural Americans will even travel farther, presumably because it's safer. But basically, the way to look at this chart is, urban people in urban residents of 1 million plus, they're basically willing to travel, as are those under 1 million. But basically, these are shorter trips, right? When we asked approximately what is the farthest distance you plan to travel, people are going to kind of keep it local, right? It's the within 50 miles at 26%, within 200 miles within 19%, and then after that, it really drops off. So the range for short flights and for airlines, basically, this is the economic crisis for the airline industry in a single chart, right? People just do not want to take long trips right now, given all the instability. But what's interesting is that over 40% plan to travel the same distance or more last year, right? So even as they're traveling in shorter distances, the frequency of these trips are higher. And so we asked this question, thinking again to the holidays this November and December, will you be traveling a shorter or longer distance for the holidays versus last year? Now, 32% are telling us that they're traveling about the same. 29% saying that they're traveling a shorter distance, sort of similar to what we just saw on the previous chart. And those numbers pop a little bit against younger people. There's only 10% of people saying that they're going to travel a longer distance. And then there's others that are saying that they don't plan to travel to take any vacation or holiday. And again, those numbers, bump up against older folks, boomers and seniors that are more presumably, worried about COVID. But I think it's interesting about this. You can kind of tune this up and say there's kind of 9 out of 10 Americans that are going to kind of travel, but they're going to sort of stay local. And so again, this local regional opportunity for the great outdoors is something we think that is really important and interesting. And I'm going to tag that on to another opportunity about how they're open to sort of reappraising brands in a second. So big opportunities for local brands to sort of sell in the regions as people are focused on being out and about, but are in their locale. So nearly 1/3 of people, when we ask this question, as you look ahead to the fall and winter months, which of the following describes your mindset? And basically, almost a third of people say that they're going to try to find creative ways to socialize safely in person this winter. So 40% saying that I will stay in my home as much as possible, leaving only for essential errands, no gatherings, no in-person shopping. So they're getting out and traveling, but when it comes to the shopping, they are focused on, sort of really avoiding any of those malls and any of the things that are going to kind of create potential harm. 29% say that they're going to find creative ways to socialize safely in person. This means eating outside, heated patios, social distance gathering, planning activities. And then also, I plan to live as normally as possible. So I'd like to take those two numbers actually, 23 and 29%. You basically have people that are saying, I'm trying to get on with my life. I'm trying to socialize. Remember we showed you that chart earlier, and I'm going to do that in creative ways. So again, as you think of out-of-home advertising, assume that people are going to be out because of these reasons. They want to get together with friends in a safe way. They want to, make trips and do things outdoors, right? But there's also, I think, a huge opportunity for brands that you wouldn't normally consider. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have a very modest terrace in New York City, and my wife and I are from Minnesota, and we basically went online to Faribault wool blankets and bought wool blankets to take out to eat outside, in the restaurants as we get closer to late October in New York City. So again, thinking regionally, what are the opportunities for brands that might not have normally maybe advertised during this time period because people's habits are changing? So follow those habits for those opportunities. And, not surprisingly, Americans view family households as the safest place to gather this winter. Again, similar to what we saw during the shelter in place, the places that you're willing to go to are family members' homes at 67%. But look at the drop off between that and friends and stores and restaurants, right? The trust really drops because of the concern, over COVID and the ability to not being able to be sure that you're safe. And so how concerned are you, that people will be relaxing their stance on COVID? A lot of people are really worried. Almost 8 in 10 Americans are worried with this uptick that we're going to drop our guard and lose the progress that we've had. Again, connect that to that previous chart I showed you on fear, where 77%, I believe, or 72% fear a second wave of COVID approaching, even as we're still battling the first wave. So the other thing that's happened, again, some behaviors are going to snap back, right? But others are actually going to sort of move forward and become sort of new norms for us. And that's the trick in all this, is trying to really understand what's changing. What we are seeing is that people are telling us, it's stated data, but they're telling us that their socializing is going to be different. And we're seeing that in this chart, for example, people ahead after the summer ends and outside temperatures will become colder, how comfortable would you be to do each of the following activities indoors? So socializing with friends or family, 72%. We're seeing what we call these pandemic pods, where people are really getting closer to people that they trust. This becomes a major character issue. And so that is where the comfort is around small groups of people, but primarily family members and very close circles of friends. But then looking at the hair salon, going to the mall, eating in a restaurant, I mean, these numbers are quite encouraging, not so much for a gym, but again, it just shows you how much people miss the normal activities of life. And you can kind of get a sense of the places where they're willing to do things and not. And again, on the right-hand side in the gray shows you the near majorities in many instances are not really comfortable with that. So let's piece this all together and kind of close it down here and look at some implications. And I'd love to, Steve, to kind of see what kind of questions we might have. But COVID lockdowns have really given consumers a renewed appreciation for the outdoors. This is that idea I was telling you about, out is in. And we asked, how much has your appreciation of experiences and awarenesses of your surroundings increased, when you've been outside? And, it's kind of something we take for granted, right? We get up and go to the bus stop or walk to the subway station or go get in our car and drive and get a coffee and go to work And, the outdoors was just kind of part of our being, but now it's really becoming more interesting. So 69% say very much or somewhat that I'm actually having greater appreciation in experiences. So again, like I told you earlier, high sensory sort of people, when they're out and about, they're not taking it for granted, they're appreciating it, right? And so we asked, that are you noticing things? Are you noticing street signs, murals, local stores, fronts, nature? And 69% say they're doing that, especially people from bigger cities. 76% of people in cities that are bigger than 1 million people are out and about and noticing these things. They're stopping and smelling the roses, for lack of a better metaphor. But again, I think that becomes so important as we start to think about out-of-home advertising, is that they are more attuned to their environment. And remember that chart I showed you at the beginning that said that they're doing things differently. They're not just in their cars, they're on their bikes and they're like walking. And so they've got a greater appreciation. They're noticing more things. And those numbers are really high from suburban and rural as well, at 68 and 64%. In fact, people are using the outdoors for therapy, right? 46% say they're walking more. We asked these questions about trying to get out of the house as often as you can. 2/3 of Americans say they're doing that, even if it's just for a drive or a walk around town. Don't know if you saw the funny flight last week from Qantas Airlines, where they did a flight to nowhere that took off from Melbourne and landed in Melbourne. Well, people are kind of doing that. They're doing walks around the neighborhood for nowhere. But basically, it's to get out and to sort of get the fresh air and sort of work on enormous stress and anxiety that we see in our data is really gripping 72% of Americans. And look at these other statistics. 2/3 say they've been trying to find safe outdoor activities to spend their time. And 48% are trying to find places to work from home or spend time outdoors, such as parks, outdoor coffee shops, or a friend patio. So again, the outdoors is winning. That's the place where not only feel the safest, but we feel a little bit more like our best selves. Now, the other question we asked is, with social restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic put into place, how interested are you in each of the following alternate activities? And again, 7 out of 10 Americans say that they're interested in walking around their neighborhoods, and they're doing that. 58% in a public park. 55% would even consider drive-in outdoor movies. 52% considering going hiking or camping. Obviously, the state parks were hugely popular this year, as were lots of regional trips into the woods and places where you could socially distance. And then outdoor pop-up retail shops, 52%. So even outdoor exercising classes, 38%. The outdoors is where it's at. Now, we also asked this question, with social distancing restrictions due to the COVID pandemic, how interested are you in each of the following alternate activities? And so gold is interested and gray is not interested. And you can see getting takeout from restaurants is very much thing that people are doing, right? 71%. As is outdoor seating. Surprisingly, 57% of Americans, and this is all across America, this just isn't in the cities, this is weighted for natural population of Americans. So more people are getting outdoors and hitting the bars and the restaurants. And then, 49% are even saying food trucks, mobile restaurants work. And the big opportunity here, we believe also, potentially from an out-of-home opportunity for restaurants, and if they can afford it in the regions and local, is that 65% wish there were more outdoor dining offerings. So the restaurant industry has clearly struggled. Are they a big opportunity to really be telling their story and letting people know that they're out and about and that they're open for business? And then, almost half are tired of cooking meals at home. Interestingly, we saw at the beginning of our Harris Poll surveys in March and April, large portion sizes were big. OJ was big, pancakes were big, big cereal boxes, and now you're starting to see people fatigue of that. And so that also creates an opportunity. So now let's just kind of close out and look a little bit about what's happening with out of home. And because of all these outdoor activities that we've just been talking about, because of this highly more attuned, sensitive people with sensory opportunities or sensory sort of emotions as they're thinking about being outside, they're more perceptive. That seems to be doing an interesting opportunity for noticing more out of home. So, we have 14% saying yes, much. They are very much more noticing billboards, outdoor video screens, posters, signage, and other out-of-home ads than before the pandemic began. And then there's 31% that say yes, slightly more. I'm definitely understanding that. And so you kind of have 45% kind of saying that. And those are pretty good numbers from a marketing standpoint when we ask these types of questions, because we tend to get more of a negative response to various promotions, advertising questions when asked to people. So to say that they're noticing these, I think, is pretty strong. And you're also seeing that against males, younger males, millennial men, they seem to be noticing this a little bit more. Some interesting pops there, as well as people, again, in urban environments. Again, connect some of these other trends. Lots of people in cities are out for temporary housing, doing those workations, or they have a second house or a second place to go to, or they're basically considering a lifestyle change. We've seen a lot of that with urban Americans interested in more suburban and rural environments. That's somewhere around, I think, 32% right now. So what's happening here too is that out-of-home advertising is actually empowering consumers. It's giving them information. And we asked for those billboard, out-of-home, various elements, what did you see that was useful to you? And the number one thing was COVID, safety, and hygiene, 38%, followed by special offers and promotions at 23%, and critically, updates on advertiser business hours and services at 20%, or awareness of a new business or service at 18%. So just piecing those together, plus directions to an advertiser's business, all these things are saying that this is a medium right now. As new people are out and about, more people are considering new brands, as we talked about. Outdoor is actually a critical linkage to sort of providing a lot of this information, to getting a lot of small businesses going, potentially to really create new environments and opportunities for D2C brands, to basically do a great job of sort of telling people what's out there and how you can get it. And we see that on the second side for the billboard outdoor industry, which of the following best describes your reaction? A third are grateful for useful information. 23% say they're educated about something new, right? And 20% say they're comforted that it's a sign that business is back, which I thought was interesting. And 16% see the ads as being very creative, and equal numbers say they're being entertaining. So together, about a third of Americans are saying that outdoor advertising is impactful and it works and it's got a sense of creative leverage. I think this is another big opportunity, and we call this being zoomed out, right? How long are you guys are probably tired of listening to me on a screen, but all day long with Zoom ads and all the digital usage that's happening as we're sort of cooped up for work and home, people are tuning out digital ads. Which is interesting. And at the same time, we're saying that out-of-home advertising is useful. So when asked this question, among many that we asked, 68% said these days I spend so much time looking at screens that I often tune out digital online ads. And when asked on the other hand about outdoor, when you're thinking about products for you and yourself or others, billboards at 56% were seen as useful. Subway, public station posters at 50%, bus shelters at 49%, and 47% sides of buses and taxi cabs. So again, even if they're not in the public transportation per se, they are noticing these things as they're out and about, and that those things are creating impact. So lastly, let's look at changing consumer habits. Real fast, Americans miss the experience in general of shopping, 47%. They miss seeing and testing products at 41%. They miss the old-fashioned thing of browsing and talking to salespeople as well. And really, a lot of them want that retail back in person after COVID, right? 2/3 when the economy reopens and the curve is flattened, want to shop in stores again. 69% and want to shop for groceries at 76%, something we really miss. So there's going to be blended online and sort of in-person shopping, we believe, for the foreseeable future. But right now, shopping is pragmatic, it's about efficiency, and it's about safety. So you see this, the number one thing when asked about how your mindset has changed in regard to shopping, 43% say I try to make fewer trips to the store and stock up on items. And 34% say I've stopped casually shopping, and 29% say I prefer to shop at retailers that have thoughtfully planned through their traffic. And then 28% say I've become a better planner. And then 26%, again, back to that regional community, say I try to shop more at locally owned stores to support the economy in my community. And you can see some of the other points there. But again, it's that mindset that I think it's so important, that people are going on a mission. So they are not just sort of daydreaming their way through driving and shopping. They're actually thinking about what they're going to do and how they're going to get out there. So you have a more engaged consumer. And as we kind of close this out, consumer spending has been centered around equipping the home. So clearly we're seeing in all our Harris Poll data, anything to fortify the home, to protect against a second wave, is where they're spending their money. So more on telco, more on grocery stores, more on QSRs, surgical ways to get in and out and to get fed. Interestingly, the same or more, now almost 65% are doing the same or more big box retail. That's for two reasons. One, people are renovating their homes and making them sort of COVID proof for another potential wave. And the second thing is the big box stores feel safer. We're seeing that in our data. And then obviously drugstores, gas and convenience are also there. But digital acceleration is going to ramp up this winter. There's going to be more family Zooms, whether we like them or not, virtual workouts and curbside pickup. And so again, as you think about digital, it's on one hand sort of obviously a competition medium, but it could also be a great revenue stream for brands, right? The disruption of Peloton versus SoulCycle and sort of the traditional gyms. How many, as I said before about these D2C brands, these online brands that are being used more in the home, how can they be leveraged from out of home while we have these consumers out in this mindset, spending a lot more time seeing billboards, as they tell us, and spending a lot more time feeling more engaged because of the way that they're acting. And so, virtual video calls, researching a product online workouts from home, ordering food or other products from curbside pickup. Again, all these are sort of rising dramatically in the green at the same time that there's the same amount. So cum those two numbers, the gray and the green together, as we'll share the deck so you can see this in greater detail, but you get a really good picture for sort of how people's habits are changing. And I think, it's really important to understand that COVID is changing our shopping preferences, right? So there is more online, clearly at 58% right now. But again, previous charts showed you that once it's safe, people want to get back and do the in-person shopping that they're doing now at 42%. And seems to, again, to be more regional. That's a theme I've hopefully hammered here today. More mom and pop shops, more supporting local businesses, more staying in your community. And then, obviously more big brand retail, as we've discussed. And, that big thing about how do I get in and out, 74% to do my trips really in a surgical way. And then there's a 50-50 wait and see about, do I want to shop earlier than normal, or do I sort of want to wait and see how bad the pandemic is as the season approaches? So I think this is a really interesting chart as we sort of close out here, is that this is the idea about out of home for brand reappraisal. So with all this dislocation, all these different changing brand mindsets and changing habits, people are being open to more brands. And so generally speaking, we asked, since the start of the pandemic, would you say you are using a mix of new brands and brands you're familiar with? 43% in green, including those numbers really pop among women by a 10-point difference. Or you're using the same brands you did before, but have not tried any new brands. That's at 32%. But notice how that skews against older people, not against younger people, right? So younger people, in particular, younger women, are far more open, as are men, to really be considering new brands in their repertoire during this time. And then there's 12% say that they'll go back and replace their brands when they're available, and there are others that are buying them just because it's the only choice. But you focus on those two big numbers on the left, you've got a really big opportunity to use out of home where again, we said people are more sensitized and open right now because of the way that they're traveling, to really use that potentially as an opportunity to help marketers during this share battle, to really help them reappraise new brands. Looking ahead, it's good news to see that people, Americans say they plan to spend more of the same on holiday gifts and meals this year. So those numbers look really good. Not surprisingly, wine, liquor, or beer sounds pretty good right now with everything that's been going on. But we see some growing confidence in the economy. And clearly, again, high demand for outdoor experiences. That's all reflective of interest of alternate activities, road trips, walking around town or neighborhood, takeout from restaurants, spending time in a public park. Anywhere you can get outside and do things is really where it's at for people. So a lot in 45 minutes. I guess we can talk longer than we should, but a couple of opportunities I think that sort of emerge here are localizing out-of-home advertising. With holiday travel being more micro and close to home, we think Americans are going to stay close and be close to their loved ones. So the trips are not going to be at 32,000 feet; they're going to be at 5 feet, right? And so how is that a really boon for local out-of-home advertising and regional out-of-home advertising? I really think it's important to also position outdoors the safe way to socialize this winter. You're not just an advertising category, you're actually an advocate for a lifestyle. You guys can be a lifestyle brand, and that's where Americans are moving to, right? Safety and socialization. So how do you position the outdoor as safe socialization? And then I think lastly, less will be more and the timing will be everything, right? Again, Americans are going to be surgical and precise the way they shop. They tell us they're going to take more trips, so they're going to be out being exposed to all the out-of-home that's out there. But we think there's a big opportunity for out-home to really engage consumers in the right place at the right time. And this impact is going to be really determined not by frequency, by engagement. And they're saying that they are engaging with advertising, they're noticing it more out of home, and they think the quality of the creative is really good. So with all that, I think there's big opportunities for the industry. And that's a quick look, Steve, or not so quick look at our data.
John, that's really terrific. I can't thank you enough for the work that you and your team did on developing all these great insights for our industry to help us better leverage, the current situation, both in the ad industry, but also the marketplace. We do have a few questions, so I'd like to share those with you. Number one, we had a question about the demographic makeup of the respondents, curiosity about, given that this was an online survey, was it more heavily canted towards white collar versus blue collar? How well did it represent the US population?
Yeah, this is weighted to reflect the natural population of the demography of the United States. So it's weighted for occupation, gender, race, and income, and those other critical factors. So we're literally getting a clear look at kind of what Main Street thinks about out of home and COVID.
Tremendous. And then we covered this, but maybe reiterate this question about what the expectations are for holiday gift giving and the spend this year versus perhaps last year historically.
Yeah, so we think, we just did a big report on holiday that we can send around as well with Bloomberg last week, but this is the year of sort of objects over experiences. And what I mean is there might have been a vacation to go skiing, taking a flight. This year it's going to be closer to home, as we've been talking about. And so objects, gift giving is going to be, we think is going to be more physical and more focused on, perhaps future vacations and things like that, but really about gift giving in sort of the more traditional sense. We're also seeing just lots of interest around finding ways to just, as we said, socialize outdoors. So outdoor products, things that can be gifts to allow people to continue to extend the season deeper into the winter in many parts of the US, which is obviously really easy to do in some places. So those types of products are really big. And then obviously home remodeling, anything around the house is something that's really big.
Great, and that really dovetails into the next question, and you really answered it. And that was, what are some current trends where out of home can really take advantage from an advertising perspective. And of course, when we were discussing transportation earlier, you mentioned that uptick in people who are looking to buy a car and also bikes and so on. So, those transportation are some other categories. Another question, can you give us any more insights into attitudes about public transit right now, especially in major urban cities, and kind of what might be the expectation for more normalization in that arena?
Yeah, this has gone up and down with the COVID cases, meaning that it went way down in terms of usage and it really hasn't ticked up. So even as the cases have risen, we haven't seen a profound change in attitudes. People are just frankly continue to sort of remain concerned about it. So, I think we had 80% concern around public transportation, as in terms of sort of the overall usage again. But again, I think the way to think about this is that people want to get back out there and they want to find a way to connect with people. And so I look past the transportation right now, but a desire, and is more that we can make these environments perceptually safe. The way that I think restaurants are starting to open back up to sort of 25% capacity in the steps that they're taking, the way offices have this challenge, the way airports have this challenge. I think with public transportation, the more news it gets out there that the medium, is safe as a means of transport, that's going to be hugely important. And nobody wants that more than urban environments and the businesses in the offices that need to get their all their workers back. High levels of Americans are taking public transportation. That's essential. And that's the thing we still have to crack.
And then I think we have time for this one last question, and I'll actually take this. There was a question about, given all this information and the fact that people have this new appreciation, what is the outlook for out of home in terms of our revenue growth? And Magna, whose data we use very frequently, they're a data analytics division of the Omnicom agency family. They project that out of home is going to have some significant growth next year, probably in the arena of about 7%, which they think will be about on the same level as digital online media's growth. So certainly the expectation is out of home will come back with some ferocity and will actually outperform some of our traditional competitors and compete actually with the growth rate of digital media. So that's a tremendous outlook. Of course, none of us have a crystal ball, but that's the best data we have right now. John, I so appreciate the great work you and your team did on this research study for us. And want to let all of our listeners know, thank you again for joining us today. The full study, an executive summary, and also a study infographic are all available now on the OAAA website. And we'll also make the recording of this webinar available later this afternoon. Thank you very much and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.